I'm still reeling from what happened, and the shock hasn't worn off. If it weren't for my toddler, my baby could have been hit by a car, heading straight for the traffic, all because my husband wasn't paying attention. I need to share this with you because my hands are still shaking, and the terror hasn't left me. I'm a 25-year-old woman, and my husband is 30. We've been together since 2018, and we have a 3-year-old daughter and a newborn son. But tonight, everything almost changed in an instant. My husband has always struggled with paying attention, but I never thought it would come to this, never imagined that his lack of focus would lead to something so catastrophic. Our neighborhood's layout doesn't help. Cars speed through the streets, and it's a constant blur of danger. I was folding clothes, minding my own business, when I suddenly heard the unmistakable cry of my toddler, "Dad, help!" That desperate, panic tone made me drop everything and sprint outside without a second thought. And what I saw, it froze me in my tracks. There, in front of me, was my newborn, his stroller hurtling toward the busy street, the wheels spinning, dangerously close to the road. I screamed and ran, pushing myself harder than I ever had in my life. My heart pounded as I grabbed the stroller, stopping it just inches from the pavement. My baby girl, in her rush to help, had tripped and scraped her knees and hands, tears streaming down her face as she tried to catch up. I scooped up my newborn, panic flooding my chest, my eyes searching desperately for my husband. And there he was. Oblivious. Talking to the neighbors, completely unaware of the chaos that had just unfolded. The anger that surged through me was unlike anything I've ever felt before. I stormed over to him, shaking with fury, yelling in disbelief. It took him a moment to register what had almost happened. Then, the apologies came pouring out, along with the tears. But it was too late. How could he be so blind? How could he ignore the cries of our toddler and let our baby roll away? Without thinking, I gathered the kids and left. I needed to get out of that house, away from the danger. I took them to my parents' place. They're on my side, but my husband won't stop texting, begging for forgiveness, calling it an honest mistake. A mistake! How could he call it that? I can't shake the horror of what almost happened, the terror of nearly losing my baby because he couldn't stay focused for 1 second. And to make matters worse, my baby girl got hurt in the process. All because he wasn't paying attention. I can't stop crying. I feel this crushing weight of guilt, even though I know it wasn't my fault. I wish this never happened, wish I could forget it all. I'm sorry this is short, I just need to hold my babies. Every time I think about it, I can't stop shaking. What if I had been just 1 second later? What if I had missed that scream? Would I be planning a funeral right now? The reason I left was because I can't stand being in that house. It's not safe for the kids with all the traffic. And I was right. That house belongs to my husband, it's his workhouse. I can't run after a stroller like that, not with my body still recovering from a C-section just 6 weeks ago. I know people will say, why wasn't I watching the kids? Well, I was inside, folding laundry like a parent does. And my husband? He's the one who took them for walks, supposed to have bonding time with them. He created this mess all on his own. This has never happened before, how was I supposed to know this would happen? Some people have said, why didn't I get him checked out? But I'm not his mother. He's 30 years old. I'm so sick of people acting like I'm supposed to parent my husband too. I have a newborn, a toddler, and I'm still healing from surgery. When I ran to save my baby, I tore some of my stitches. I don't care if he has ADHD. If he had killed my child, he would have gone to prison, ADHD or not. That's the reality. In the first part of the responses, one person said, okay, he was 100% wrong, and I'd be livid too, but I'm confused. Why was your baby left in a stroller unattended? Why did the stroller roll into the road? Were you outside, or was this something that you all do, letting the baby sit outside while your toddler plays? It was a freak accident, I guess, but it wasn't just that. Most parents have those moments, those close calls where you realize just how fragile life is. We're all human, and we make mistakes. The commenter shared a similar experience, saying they had a terrifying moment with an escalator when their son was 2. Those moments stay with you forever. But what was hardest for me to hear was the response to my anger about the ADHD. I know that ADHD can make someone unaware of certain things, but how could that be an excuse for almost killing our baby? I'm trying to understand, and maybe I'm not, but it's hard to imagine this being a simple oversight when it could have ended so much worse. Another commenter asked for clarification. Did you hear your kid scream from inside the house? Were your neighbors watching the stroller roll toward the street? Did your husband not notice it either? These questions made me pause. How could they not see it? Why didn't they act sooner? There's something off about this whole situation, and I don't know what happened yet, but I will find out. A neighbor offered to send me the security footage of what happened. Maybe that will give me the answers I need. It's a moment no mother should ever have to relive, the sound of her child's screams. That desperate cry echoed through the streets as she watched her world unravel. The question was simple, yet the answer seemed impossible. How could something so horrific happen right in front of her eyes, and why hadn't anyone seen it coming? It was a seemingly quiet afternoon. Her house, perched at the end of the street, felt like the safest place in the world. The lounge room, with its huge window, was open just enough to let the fresh air in. She could hear everything from here, the neighbors' voices 2 houses down, the distant hum of traffic from the main road. On her left was the lounge, and to the right, the kitchen. Her legs still ached from the healing process. She couldn't run fast, but there was no time to waste. As she rushed outside, she could see the neighbor's wife sprinting towards the stroller, but she was still too far off. And there, in the distance, was her husband, standing frozen. What was he doing? His hands were gripping his head, doing nothing. No reaction. No urgency. Ling Ling, a neighbor, couldn't believe her eyes. She screamed at the sight of it. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice shaking. "You just had a baby. What was your husband thinking? How could someone so close let it all slip away? Shouldn't watching your children be the most important thing? Especially on such a busy street?" The words were harsh but true. "Do you have cameras?" "I'm wondering how long your husband was talking to the neighbor," Ling Ling wondered aloud. The truth hit hard, even harder than she expected. "I tore my stitches," Opie said. She had to rush to the ER after the ordeal. While she was there, her baby girl needed care too, scraped knees, bruised hands. But the shock of the moment didn't hit her fully until much later. It wasn't until she was sitting in her parents' car, on the way to the hospital, that she realized she was bleeding. Panic seized her mom, who quickly took the baby boy back to their house while her dad drove her and the daughter to the hospital. But the worst was still coming. 11 hours later, the neighbor's wife sent over the footage. Opie stared at it, unable to make sense of what she was seeing. Her husband, pushing the stroller, had been walking ahead of their toddler. As they passed the neighbor's house, the toddler stopped to pet a cat. It was an innocent, sweet moment, one that should have been cherished, but instead, it marked the beginning of the horror. Her husband had stopped. He left the stroller on the road, without even bothering to lock the wheels, and walked up to the neighbor's driveway. He didn't even look back. For 5 minutes, he stood there, unaware. And then, as if in slow motion, the stroller started moving. The road had a slight incline, or maybe it was the wind. Whatever the cause, the stroller began to roll, headed straight for the road. Opie's toddler screamed, running after it. The neighbor tried to stop it, but the chaos only grew. The footage was chaotic, out of focus after that, but the sound, Opie couldn't forget the sound of her child crying, in pain, in fear. Her husband? He didn't even move. He stood there, his hands on his head, frozen in place. No reaction. Nothing. Only when Opie confronted him did the tears come. But the damage had already been done. What was she supposed to do now? What could she even do? The weight of it crushed her. This wasn't the life she imagined for her children. The silence from her husband was deafening. No texts, no calls, not even an apology. The only thing she could hear was the scream of her daughter, a sound that no mother should ever have to endure. It was a cold, bone-chilling feeling, like her blood had turned to ice. Fear was all she could feel, and she couldn't bring herself to watch the footage again. And then the comments began flooding in, each one more infuriating than the last. One person tried to defend the husband, comparing the situation to ADHD. OP couldn't believe it. Endangering your child is never excusable, one comment fired back. Being distracted isn't a reason to put your child's life at risk. Others echoed similar sentiments, angered by the idea of letting ADHD be used as a shield. It doesn't matter, said another. Even with ADHD, you should be more vigilant. You should know better. The feedback only made OP feel more isolated, more betrayed. Her dad, in an effort to offer solace, had said he'd rather help her pay for a divorce than a funeral for her grandson. The heartbreak was palpable. I failed them, she thought, staring at the screen, the weight of her children's safety hanging over her every breath. I feel like I failed them, she said aloud. It was a cry for help, but no one had the answers. There was no simple fix. Just a moment of horror that would change everything. As the night dragged on, more responses flooded in. A mother who had been through something similar commented, "I understand. My wife can be like your husband. But nothing is worse than watching your child suffer because someone wasn't paying attention." Others added their thoughts, all pointing back to the same conclusion: negligence. The blame couldn't be shifted. The trust had been broken, and the consequences were devastating. With a final shuddering breath, OP promised she would update when she could. But right now, the only thing that mattered was the safety of her children, no one else. Not her husband. Not the footage. Just her kids, and the pain she felt watching them grow up in a world that could be so careless.